The Supreme Court puts a controversial gender ruling on hold, what it could mean for schools across the country. An American woman killed overseas, why police do not believe it was terrorism. Ramping up the war on terror, the president visits the Pentagon as the U.S. broadens its fight against ISIS. And Donald Trump promises more freedom for churches if he's elected president. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, August 4th, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. The U.S. Supreme Court says a Virginia school board can block a transgender student from using the bathroom of her choice. However, the decision is only temporary while this case is under appeal. Jason Calvi says the outcome could affect public schools across America.
This soon-to-be high school senior is a girl who says she's a boy. She legally changed her name to Gavin. She used the boys' bathroom at school for about 7 weeks in 2014, but parents complained, including the vast majority at school board meetings worried about things like their kids' privacy. So the Gloucester School Board in Virginia said students must use the bathroom of their biological sex or a private one. The ACLU sued on Gavin's behalf, arguing she's currently the only student in his school who must use separate private restrooms. The distinction stigmatizes, marks him as different, isolates. An appeals court ruled that she could use the boys' bathroom. Then the school board asked the U.S. Supreme Court for an emergency temporary ruling. Their 5-3 decision yesterday finds the school, for the time being, can stop the girl from using the boys' bathroom. The school board says it fully considered the interests of all students and parents. And public school leaders and parents around the country are watching this case, including this Catholic mother.
We hear a lot of talk about bathrooms.
Yeah.
This isn't just bathrooms, it's locker rooms, it's athletic teams, it's hotel rooms on student overnight trips for school purposes.
Elizabeth Schultz serves on the school board of one of the largest districts in the country, Fairfax County, Virginia.
The student in this case says she feels stigmatized. How do you balance that with concerns that you hear from parents?
Both as a Catholic and as a school board member, you have to look at if you approach with truth and love the dignity of all people, but meet the needs of that individual without compromising the sanctity and dignity and respect for all of the rest of the student population and the employee population. That is what becomes central.
Again, the ruling is temporary. The Gloucester School Board is expected to ask the Supreme Court to hear this case. If they don't pick it up, then the appeals court decision is reinstated, which would mean the girl could use the boys' restroom. Brian?
Jason Calvi at the U.S. Supreme Court. Thank you, Jason. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. An American woman is killed in a London knife attack that left 5 other people injured. Police responded to calls about a man attacking people near London's Russell Square, popular with tourists. The 5 surviving victims are from the UK, the US, Israel, and Australia. Investigators say the suspect is a Norwegian teenager of Somali origin who appears to have mental issues.
At this time, we believe it's a spontaneous attack and that the victims were selected at random. So far, we have found no evidence of radicalisation that would suggest that the man in our custody is in any way motivated by terrorism.
Last night's attack came just days after authorities warned Britons to be vigilant in light of recent ISIS attacks. Police used a stun gun to subdue the 19-year-old suspect. He was arrested on suspicion of murder. The president says ISIS continues to lose territory in Syria and Iraq. He spoke at a news conference today at the Pentagon. Our White House correspondent Lauren Ashburn is at the White House tonight. Lauren?
Brian, the president received an update from his National Security Council on the state of the fight against ISIS. In the meeting were Defense Secretary Ash Carter, CIA Director John Brennan, and other cabinet secretaries. He praised recent gains by the U.S. and its partners in fighting terrorists, but said that these successes in containing ISIS mean that there are more high-profile attacks elsewhere. Earlier this week, the Obama administration launched a new campaign of airstrikes in Libya. The goal is to rout ISIS from their regional seat of power in the coastal city of Sirte. A Pentagon spokesman says the operation will take weeks to complete. There are about 1,000 ISIS fighters in the city. As of June 15th, the Pentagon reports that the campaign against ISIS in Syria and Iraq has cost $8 billion. That's a daily cost of $11.8 million for just over 2 years. The U.S. Air Force has shouldered 66% of that cost. President Obama spoke at the Pentagon today after his meeting with national security advisors.
We're going to keep going after ISIL aggressively across every front of this campaign. Our air campaign continues to hammer ISIL targets. More than 14,000 strikes so far, more than 100,000 sorties, including those hitting the ISIL core in Raqqa and in Mosul.
As President Obama heads off for 2 weeks of vacation, he will be receiving daily briefings. Now, Speaker Paul Ryan says that he will not revoke his endorsement of Donald Trump in the world of politics. He's called Trump's criticism of a Gold Star mother beyond the pale. Trump said earlier this week he's not there yet when it comes to endorsing Ryan in his reelection. Ryan dismissed the non-endorsement, saying today the only people he cares about are his employers in his district. Polls in swing states show it's been a rough week for Donald Trump's relationship with the Republican Party. Another Republican congressman says he's unlikely to support Trump for president. Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois says Trump is, quote, beginning to cross a lot of red lines of the unforgivable in politics. Meanwhile, there are those like Representative Sean Duffy of Wisconsin who say Hillary is not the answer.
When you look at Donald Trump's words, but you compare them to Hillary Clinton's failed action, I think Hillary Clinton is unacceptable. And those are the only choices that you have.
And Donald Trump is reiterating his position on repealing a ban on political organizing and fundraising by churches. At a campaign rally, he says the tax code law prevents pastors from speaking your minds from your own pulpits. Repealing the ban is part of the GOP platform. A Pew Research poll finds 80% of evangelicals support Trump.
We had such unbelievable support, evangelical support, tremendous evangelical support. But I asked them, we are going to take out the language because basically they're being silenced. And I don't want my minister or my pastor to be silenced.
Polls in swing states show Donald Trump trailing Hillary Clinton by wide margins. Trump heads to Iowa and Wisconsin tomorrow with running mate Governor Pence. Brian?
Lauren Ashburn at the White House, thank you. Earl is losing steam after hitting Belize this morning as a Category 1 hurricane. As winds continue to diminish tonight, the storm is likely to be soon downgraded to a tropical depression. Heavy rain, though, possible over southern Mexico as Earl moves west at about 15 miles an hour. Turkey issues an arrest warrant for Muslim cleric living here in the United States. Fethullah Gulen denies any involvement in last month's military coup attempt. He lives in self-imposed exile in Pennsylvania. Turkey claims he is the mastermind behind the attempt to overthrow its government. Gulen supporters at the Rumi Forum in Washington, D.C. say he's not responsible.
It's one thing to be anti-coup, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're necessarily pro-Erdogan or pro this current government. This is taking Turkey down a very dangerous path. Both as a state and as a people, and in particular very, very difficult for those that have been incarcerated under God knows what type of evidence.
Turkey has designated Gulen's movement as a terror organization. The White House denies a cash payment of $400 million to Iran in January was ransom for 5 detained Americans. Reporters pressed spokesman Josh Earnest, who claims the U.S. was returning Iran's own money.
Was this money ransom for the folks that were released?
No, it was not. It is against the policy of the United States to pay ransom for hostages.
Just a coincidence.
There was a conscious strategic decision that was made on the part of the Obama administration as we were implementing the deal to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
Blaise Mishtal directs the National Security Program at the Bipartisan Policy Center. How can the administration claim that this cash exchange and the prisoner swap are unrelated?
Well, the White House says that they were being negotiated by separate teams in separate rooms at separate times. So you had one team talking about the money and another team talking about the prisoners. So they are separate deals.
If they did pay ransom, maybe under a different name. What should the repercussions be?
Well, the policy against not paying ransom for hostages is just that. It's a policy. It's not a law. So there's no legal repercussions here. But what you're likely to see are geopolitical and political repercussions. What matters is, does Iran believe that we paid ransom? Does the rest of the world believe that we paid ransom? If they do, they're going to take more hostages. And we've already seen that. Iran has just taken 2 more U.S. citizens hostage, probably to get more money. And the same will be done by other groups. Politically, there might be less support for this deal by the next administration if they think that was the cost that we had to pay.
If Iran were to stop honoring this deal, how long would it take them to tool up and be back where they were, if not even further along in their development of nuclear weapons?
The sad answer is it wouldn't take them very long. What we've had them do is dismantle lots of their program, but not discard or destroy it. So all they'd have to do is take out of mothballs lots of centrifuges. In fact, they've been allowed to build more centrifuges since the deal went into place. And it wouldn't take them long to get them spinning again. And the real question is, how long would it take for the administration to react to Iran backing out of the deal? And the answer there, I'm afraid, is it would take even longer.
Is it possible to even monitor what's going on or what could go on?
It is, and one of the good things about this deal is that it allows for more stringent inspections than we had before. Does that mean that we know everything that's happening in Iran? Probably not.
So are you concerned that we're going in the wrong direction on this thing, or do you think that there's a possibility that at least this deal could hold long enough for us to get a new policy and strategy in place?
I think that's actually what's important here, is this deal needs to be reevaluated, but backing out of it drastically will give Iran the upper hand. So for now, we have to stick with it, and I think we need to have a new administration and Congress come in, take another look at the deal, look at its consequences, and then rethink where we're going.
From the Bipartisan Policy Center, Blaise Mishtal, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Coming up, the Pope's personal pilgrimage, why he chose to travel to Assisi today, and Olympics security, the challenges facing police in the host city. St. John Vianney, the Curé of Ars, is remembered today on the church calendar. A simple French parish priest, he was known for spending long hours hearing confessions. The patron of priests and confessors died on August 4th, 1859. Thanks for joining us this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. After meeting with Dominicans this morning, Pope Francis greets Franciscans today during a quick pilgrimage to Assisi. He preached there on forgiveness, calling it a caress. Our Rome producer, Mary Shovlin, is joining us. Mary, give us a snapshot of our Jesuit Pope's day with friars.
Well, he started out with the Dominicans this morning at 10 a.m. in the Vatican's Clementine Hall. He met with a group of Dominicans who are here in Rome for their general chapter. Then after lunch at 3, he got on the helicopter and flew to Assisi, because there they're celebrating the great pardon of Assisi, Pope Francis having chosen the name Francis. So very significant today. And he had that message of forgiveness for today, of pardon for our brothers and sisters.
Explain the 800-year connection for Franciscans and Dominicans this year.
Well, the Dominicans are here in Rome for the general chapter, but they're also celebrating a special Jubilee year this year. It's the 800th anniversary since their founding by St. Dominic back in 1216. The Franciscans, on the other hand, are celebrating the 800th anniversary of what's known as the Pardon of Assisi, which Pope Francis asked the Pope for, the special indulgence, which he did also grant back in the year 1216. So both orders celebrating 800 anniversaries today.
What is the Pardon of Assisi, Mary, and the significance of the small chapel that Francis visited?
In that small chapel, the Franciscan order was born. This is where St. Francis heard God's voice to begin to follow him in extreme poverty and live the gospel. So the order was born there. It was also in that small chapel where Pope Francis visited today that Christ appeared to St. Francis along with Our Lady and the angels. In that moment, St. Francis asked God to grant any pilgrim that would visit that small chapel an indulgence. And then later, Pope Honorius also gave his approval for that indulgence. So here we are celebrating that very anniversary of what happened that day in Assisi today.
And a big celebration for the Franciscans as well as the Dominicans, and our Jesuit Pope celebrating with them. Mary Shovlin joining us from Rome. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Brian.
Islamic State militants are still committing genocide against Iraq's Yazidi religious minority. A UN commission investigating human rights abuses issued a report on that today, calling for an end to the suffering. The Syriac Catholic Patriarch says Christians in the Middle East also feel abandoned and betrayed by the civilized world. Well, as athletes and fans look forward to the Summer Olympics, security is a concern. There's a definite dark side to the host city of Rio de Janeiro. Gun battles in the Olympic city, a clash between police and gangs in one of Rio de Janeiro's impoverished slums, with civilians caught in the middle. Urban warfare in densely populated communities where parents struggle to keep their children safe. This woman says 2 bullets flew into a children's recreation center. When armored personnel carriers and police special forces move in, they trigger more gunfire. It's not exactly what you'd expect in the host city of the upcoming Summer Olympics.
Today, we live in the middle of a crossfire, caught in a war that is not our own.
Luisa Cabral is a well-respected community activist in one of Rio's biggest favelas or slums. She says the war between the police and the gangs is getting worse. She argues that the upcoming Olympics won't make any impact on the violence here. The authorities in Rio insist they have a plan for keeping the games safe by deploying some 85,000 police and soldiers across the city. But these days, even members of Olympic teams are getting caught up in the violence.
Well, actually, I went to the gas station. I was just meters away, and a gunfight started. All of a sudden, everybody started running at the gas station and hiding behind things. So I thought, well, that might be time to just lay flat in the motorboat and hide as well.
Part of the problem is that there are effectively 2 systems of law and order in Rio. Police keep control in the affluent touristic parts of the city. But in the much poorer hilltops, there's a very different group in charge: drug traffickers and gangs. Given the frightening conditions many residents face in this troubled city, sheer survival is more important than bronze, silver, and gold. And some Olympic competitions are already underway even before tomorrow's opening ceremonies. Up next, healthcare workers forced to refer patients for abortions. The Thomas More Society's Tom Brecken dissects an Illinois state law. And a funding threat for students attending religious colleges and universities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore me to the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit. From Psalm 51, today's responsorial. Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. A bill requiring medical professionals to refer patients for abortions is signed into law by Illinois' Republican governor. Tom Brecken, President and Chief Counsel of the Thomas More Society, joining us by Skype from Chicago. Tom, isn't this Health Care Right of Conscience Act really just the opposite of what it sounds like?
Absolutely, Brian. We had the strongest conscience law in the country here in Illinois, and they've effectively turned it upside down. They've made it one of the worst laws. We are now mandate any healthcare worker, if they won't do abortions or won't do sterilization, they must nonetheless refer for abortion, give people a list of where they can go or make arrangements for someone to get that abortion. Totally against any sense of respect for religious conscience.
Now, your Republican governor, Bruce Rauner, signed this. Did that surprise you?
Let's say we were disappointed. He had made a commitment before the election that he wouldn't get mixed up with social issues. That's the way he put it. On this occasion, despite contacts from so many people of faith in Illinois, he reneged on that promise.
Well, I know you have promised to challenge this in court. On what grounds?
The grounds are many, but essentially the right to speak under the First Amendment also implies necessarily a right not to speak when you don't want to speak on a topic. And this law, of course, mandating referral for something that's conscientiously objectionable goes right in the teeth of that constitutional guarantee. So that's where we begin, Brian. But in addition, there are federal laws that protect healthcare workers, and we'll certainly invoke those laws too. You can't discriminate against somebody because they refuse to refer or perform abortions, and that law applies too.
Yeah, what will happen to healthcare workers who do, if they don't go along with this?
Well, the law says that an employing entity can require their healthcare employees to abide by these mandates. The healthcare entity is supposed to create a protocol and post it, providing these things. So we expect there'll be a lot of disciplines, a lot of discharges when people stand up for their conscience, and we'll be defending them in court.
And we look forward to seeing the progress in those cases and hearing from you. Tom Brecka with the Thomas More Society, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
And the California legislature considers a bill critics claim will hurt minority students. The measure would strip Cal grants from students who attend accredited religious colleges in California. Los Angeles Archbishop Jose Gomez condemns the legislation in several tweets. He writes, "As it is written today, SB 1146 is an overreach that violates the religious freedom of institutions that serve thousands of Californians." He continues, "Those who would truly be punished by this bill are California's low-income and minority communities." Proponents say it protects against discrimination by faith-based colleges. Diana Verm is legal counsel for the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. What is a Cal grant, and what role does that play in people accessing higher education?
A Cal grant is California state funding for low-income students, most of whom are minority, to attend private or public colleges of their choice.
So if the bill passes, what would it do, and who would get the brunt of this?
So the main effect of the bill would be to crush the dreams of 16,000 students in religious schools in California who are receiving Cal grants. Those students are mostly minorities. 3 out of 4 of those 16,000 students are minorities, and they'll be forced to either drop out or to attend California state schools, which don't have room for them and which have much lower graduation rates for minorities than the religious schools do.
In this bill, in putting this forward to the legislature, it talks about, addressing discrimination. What kind of discrimination are they talking about here?
We know that this case is not about discrimination. It's about saving money off of the backs of poor college students, because last year the California legislature proposed a bill that would reduce funding for all private schools, and that didn't work, so now they're picking off the religious schools. The problem is that this will cost taxpayers $100 million more, because those students will have to go to California state schools that are subsidized.
So what is the Becket Fund planning to do about this?
Well, the main problem is that this bill targets the religious students by preventing them from attending the schools of their choice. So we're hopeful that once Californians learn about the effects of this bill on religious communities, the legislature will drop the bill.
If it doesn't, if it passes, like the one that just passed in Illinois that we were talking with Tom Brecka about, will that be challenged?
I'm sure that there will be a challenge under the Constitution.
So are you concerned about this kind of bill being considered in other states?
Anytime California passes something, you can always see it in another state. And so the Becket Fund is trying to make sure that Californians are aware of what this bill will do to religious minority communities so that California can take the first step in preventing it.
All right, Diana Verm with the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, which we're pleased to say represents EWTN in our challenge of the HHS mandate case. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Brian, for having me.
And thank you for joining us tonight. For our entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight with another look at the Pope's pilgrimage today, the beautiful trip to Assisi. Good night. God bless you.